Somebody's lining up the pins again. The blank one's drifting closer to the fence than it was, and I never touched it. Evening, or morning, wherever you're laying your head right now. Don't much matter. Fire's low, same as I favor it, and the wind's got that first bite of fall working through the porch boards. Take a breath. Let your shoulders come on down off your ears. Ain't nothing in this file that needs you tense to hear it. Some of you know me from the mailbox down at the end of my lane. Still reads Silas Vance in letters my own daddy painted. Though I don't believe a soul round here has called me that since before my knees started their complaining. It's just Abe. And I feel the ones of you who've been settling in by this fire a good long while now. I know you're particular quiet, same as I'd know a neighbor's knock. Go on and get comfortable, same as always. And if this is your first night pulling a chair up close, hit that little subscribe button there. Don't cost you a thing, and it lets me know to keep a spot warm for you the next time I strike a match. Tonight's file comes out of a holler they call Sorrow Branch, and it concerns a quilt. Not just any quilt, the kind some of the old families up in coal country used to keep. What they called, plain as anything, a graveyard quilt. Now, if you never heard of such a thing, I'll tell you plain, on account of it matters to the account. Some families, generations back, had a particular kind of quilt made for keeping track of kin. Stitched along the bottom border, there'd be a graveyard scene. A little picket fence, appliqued in cloth. Headstones sewed in rows behind it. And up above that fence line, pinned loose, not sewed down permanent, there'd be a row of little coffin-shaped patches, one for every living member of the family, each one bearing initials stitched in thread. When somebody in that family passed on, the women folk would take that person's coffin patch and they'd move it down past the fence into the graveyard part of the quilt, and they'd sew it down proper, permanent. So the quilt, over the years, become a kind of record, a family Bible made out of cotton and thread, is how one woman put it to me once. You could look at that quilt and see, at a glance, who was living and who'd gone on. This account comes by way of a woman named Ada Prewitt, 34 years old, who inherited just such a quilt off her Aunt Vanna up in Sorrow Branch this past spring. Sorrow Branch ain't much more than a name on an old surveyor's map anymore. A scatter of home places, half of 'em empty now, strung along a creek that runs low and brown most of the year. The kind of holler where the families that stayed knew each other's business 3 generations deep, and the families that left mostly didn't come back, except for buryings. Aunt Vanna was the last of the old Prewitt women still living up there full time. kept chickens, kept a garden longer than her knees rightly allowed, and kept that quilt, folded away, same as her mother had, and her mother before that. Ada wasn't raised superstitious, she'll tell you that herself. Grew up 2 counties over, came up to Sarah Branch mostly for holidays and funerals, same as most folks her age who left the mountain for work. When Aunt Vanna passed, she was the last of that generation of the family left living in the old home place. Ada was the one come up to settle the estate, on account of being the only kin without young ones tying her down elsewhere. The house was small, 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, up a gravel road that turned to mud any time it rained more than a spell. Ada figured on a weekend's work. Clear out what could be sold, box up what couldn't, list the property, and get on back to her own life. She found the quilt folded in a cedar chest at the foot of Aunt Vanna's bed, wrapped in an old flour sack, like it was something precious. And precious it was, in its way. Ada unfolded it out on the porch rail to get a good look, and she said the workmanship near took her breath. Every stitch tight and even. The graveyard border done in grays and greens, faded soft with age, but not a thread loose anywhere in it. Above the fence line, there was near 30 of them little coffin patches, some stitched down permanent into the graveyard proper. Them was the family gone on. Others still pinned loose up in the living section. Cousins, second cousins, an uncle out in Ohio, Ada's own mother, and Ada herself. She found her own initials, A.P., stitched onto one of them patches, pinned up near the top corner. Said it gave her a queer little turn, seeing her own name on something shaped like that. But she told herself it was just tradition. Just an old family habit, same as putting names in a family Bible. There was the last patch, though, the one furthest off to the side, hanging loose and a little crooked compared to the others. That'd give a real pause. It didn't have no initials on it at all. Just blank cloth, same shape as the rest, same careful stitching round the edges, but nothing written on it, nothing claimed. Ada asked around some, at the funeral and after, whether anybody knew who that blank one belonged to. Her cousin Idella, who'd known Aunt Vanna best of anybody left living, told her that patch had always been blank, long as anybody in the family could recall. Generations of women had stitched onto that quilt, added new coffins for new babies, moved patches down into the graveyard as folks passed. And that one corner patch had simply always hung there, unclaimed. Same shape, same cloth, never getting a name put to it. Idella told her one more thing, quiet, out on the porch after most of the mourners had gone. She said Aunt Vanna had a rule about that quilt, same as her mother before her and her mother before that. You never spoke a name over the blank patch, and you never slept under that quilt while it was hanging loose and unclaimed. Fold it away in the chest, use something else for cover, and leave that particular patch be. Ada allowed as how that seemed like an awful particular rule for an old piece of needlework. But she folded the quilt back into the chest, same as her aunt always had it. It was folding it away that second time, she told Idella later, that she noticed a scrap of paper pinned to the underside of the backing cloth, up near that same blank corner. Old paper, soft as cloth itself from age, with a few lines wrote on it in a spidery, careful hand. It read, near as Ada could make out, "Let the empty one lay. She chooses her own in her own time. Do not name her, and do not warm her, and she will pass you by, same as she has passed the rest of us." No signature, no date, just them few lines, pinned in place same as the coffin patches themselves, like somebody long gone had wanted the warning to travel with the quilt itself, in case the telling of it ever got lost between one generation of women and the next. Ada didn't think on it hard again for near 3 weeks. Now the nights had turned cold early that year, up on the mountain, and Ada, staying in the house most weekends while she sorted the estate, run short on proper bedding one particular Friday. She'd forgot to bring an extra blanket up from her own place, and the little propane heater in that back room wasn't near enough to keep the chill off by itself. She thought of the quilt in the chest, told herself plain as anything that she was a grown woman with a business degree, and she wasn't about to freeze on account of an old wives' tale about a piece of cloth. She took it out, shook it loose, and spread it over the bed. She didn't think nothing of it that first night. Slept sound, in fact, warmer than she'd been in that house yet. It was the second night she noticed the patch had moved. Not far, just a few inches, drifting down the loose row toward the fence line, closer to the graveyard border than it had been when she first laid eyes on it. She figured she'd jostled it in her sleep, tossing about under an unfamiliar quilt. She pinned it back up where she recalled it being, best she could recollect, and went on with her evening. Third night she woke once, deep in the dark hours, certain she'd heard a small, dry, working sound, like thread being drawn tight through cloth. She lay still a long while, telling herself it was just the house settling, same as any old house does in the cold. When she finally worked up nerve to switch her lamp on, the patch had moved again. Further this time, resting right up against the picket fence border, like something fixin' to step through a gate. She took to sleeping with the lamp on after that, told herself it helped her rest easier, though she'd admit to Idella later she wasn't resting easy at all. There was a fourth night, too, that Ada didn't rightly speak of to Idella until much later, near the very end of that last phone call. Said she'd woke without knowing why, same as a body does sometimes, with no sound and no cause she could name. Lamp still burning, room still. But the air in that back bedroom had gone thick somehow, the way air gets right before a storm breaks, when everything outside goes quiet and waiting. She lay there a long while, listening to her own breath, and to something underneath her own breath, slower, steadier, not quite matching her rhythm. She told herself it was the old propane heater ticking as it cooled. She told herself that for a long while. Here's the part of the account that Idella herself only heard secondhand from Ada's own mouth near a month after, because Ada didn't tell a soul at the time. Said she didn't have proper words for it yet. She woke one night. She judges it was near 3 in the morning on account of the particular stillness of that hour, when even the crickets outside seemed to know to quiet down. And she felt a weight on her own chest. Not heavy, just present, like something resting light right over her heart through the quilt itself. She looked down in the lamplight, and the blank patch had come to rest directly over her, on top of the quilt, right above where her own breath was rising and falling. Not pinned there, just settled, like it had drifted across the whole quilt in the dark and found its place. And there was thread in it, new thread, not stitched all the way through yet, just a few loops loose, like the start of a letter being worked into the cloth. She couldn't make out what letter, not for certain. Said it might have been an A, might have been something else entirely, half-formed and waiting to be finished. She didn't sleep the rest of that night, just lay there, still as she could manage, same as a body might lay still for a spider resting on the back of their hand, waiting on it to move along on its own. Come morning, the patch was back in its usual corner, pinned loose, same as always. And when she looked close at the thread, in good daylight with her nerve back up some, she couldn't find a single new stitch anywhere on it. Clean and blank, same as the day she'd first found it in the chest. Ada folded that quilt up directly, wrapped it back in its flour sack, and put it in the chest. She slept under 3 regular blankets that night, cold as it was, and she didn't take that quilt back out again. She called Idella the following week, finally, and asked her straight out what the family understood to happen on the occasion somebody did wake that blank patch up. Idella was quiet a long while on the phone, Ada said, before she answered. Idella told her the family understanding, passed down same as the rule itself, was that the blank patch wasn't unclaimed on account of neglect. It was unclaimed on account of choice. Said the old women used to say that patch belonged to whoever woke it. Whoever slept under that quilt while it hung loose and let it settle on 'em in the dark hours. It wasn't marking a person already born into the family. It was marking whoever claimed it, by way of resting beneath it unwarned. And once a name started forming in that thread, Idella said, the family way of thinking was that name would finish itself in its own time. Not always quick, sometimes not for years, but finished all the same. Ada asked her direct whether any kin in living memory had ever actually seen that happen through to the end. Idella allowed as how her own grandmother had spoke of a second cousin back in the 60s who'd slept careless under that quilt one winter, same as Ada had. Said that cousin's coffin patch, a fresh one, stitched special after the fact, Idella believed, though she couldn't be certain, had ended up moving down into the graveyard section of the quilt inside of 2 years' time. Natural causes, officially. A young man, healthy as anybody, gone sudden in his sleep. Ada didn't sell that quilt along with the rest of the estate. Couldn't rightly bring herself to. It's boxed up now in a storage unit 2 counties over, still wrapped in its flour sack, same as it always was in that cedar chest. She told Idella near the end of that last phone call that she still catches herself some mornings running the thumb along her own collarbone before she's rightly awake. Checking, though she couldn't tell you checking for what exactly. Just checking. Idella herself won't have that quilt in her own house, not for love nor money. Told Ada plain that some things are best left folded, left quiet, left owing nobody an answer. But she did say one more thing before she rang off that night, something that stayed with Ada since, and stayed with me too, if I'm honest with you, since first hearing this account told. She said the blank patch was never really blank at all. Not in the way Ada wanted it to mean. Said it was blank the way a held breath is empty. Just waiting on the one moment it don't have to be anymore. Ada still keeps that storage unit paid up, month to month, 2 counties over. Says she goes and checks on it time to time, though she couldn't tell you rightly what she's checking for either. The flour sack, the stitching, whether the thread stayed loose or whether it started drawing tight again, somewhere in the dark of that storage unit, with nobody around to notice till it's done. That's the file on the graveyard quilt out of Sorrow Branch, far as it's been told to me straight. Make of it what you will. If sleep's found you already, that's just fine by me. That's the whole aim of settling in by this fire in the first place. And for them of you still here, still listening, I hope this one carries you on down easy, same as always. Name's Silas Vance, for any of you keeping a ledger of your own. Round these parts, though, it's just Abe. Rest easy now. I'll keep this chair warm for you.